all started with a comment on my Facebook page. I opened it up and I read, I noticed Tracy Moore keeps wearing tops that reveal her shoulders. Her shoulders, arms, and hands look a bit masculine and are not feminine. That does not look attractive at all for a woman, in my opinion. Scientists discovered that when comparing white women to black women, overall black women feature slightly more masculine features. Well, happy Black History Month. Joining me to break down today's racism, changing the conversation, and how to get non-blacks in on the conversation are writer and By Blacks founder Camille Dundas, White Nonsense Roundup member Merlin, and body positivity activist and politician Dr. Jill Andrew. Give them some love, everyone. Absolutely sucks to have to begin a conversation about Black History Month with a racist post on my page. But the reason why we're doing this, and the reason why I wanted to talk about it on this show, is because when I spoke about this post, my page blew up. And what I found is that so many of my followers and so many of our viewers didn't realize that in 2019 in Canada, racism exists. And that gave me pause. So I was shocked that there was so much shock. And I thought, you know what? We actually need to talk about this, because it doesn't matter your educational level, it doesn't matter your level of wealth, it doesn't matter what you've accomplished. If you are a person of color, you are on a very different journey than someone who is coming from a place of privilege. And I'm not saying I don't have any privilege, but as you know, my race intersects with my gender, there are things that I have to deal with that other people do not. So we're all going to talk a little bit about this. I want to start with you, Jill. You so eloquently have talked to me before about the black body and how we sort of deal with different things. And you've been out there on TED Talks and you've gotten a lot of pushback from people for being very honest. Tell us about your experiences.
Well, you know, I did a TED Talk a few years ago on fat shaming. And everything from being called a black ugly gorilla, to being called a man, to being called the N-word, I was exposed to upwards of 300 comments. You know, but to take it back a bit, we have to really contextualize the conversation in the way in which black bodies, particularly black women's bodies, have been commodified. We've been objectified for centuries. You know, I think about Saartjie Baartman and the way in which her buttocks and her genitalia was meant to be on show for many, many, many years. You know, she was a freak show act across Europe because of the size of her buttocks. So we come from a history where black women have often been seen as not only other, but as not human. So it becomes so much easier for people now in 2019 to sit from the comforts of their armchairs at home and throw hate, vitriolic hate and racism and sexism and sizeism through their screen. So we have to talk about it because it has immense emotional implications, physical implications. You know, it's terrible and it needs to stop.
There's, you know, I talked to Camille before this segment, and your concern was that you didn't want this to be 7 to 8 minutes of us complaining about race. And I agree with that 100%. I think what we need to focus on as well is how we can change the conversation or actually start the right conversation. That was your concern.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how the conversation is not what it should be.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised that people were shocked that you were getting that type of pushback on your page, because it's the brand of racism we have in Canada, where it's so subtle and it's so cloak and dagger sort of, and people think that we're just, you know, Canada the good, and we have the Underground Railroad and we just welcome everybody, and that is very far from the actual truth. But when I talk about the type of conversation, it actually starts with the individual. Before you engage, if you are a white person or a black, whatever color, before you confront someone, whether it's over you're ruining Thanksgiving dinner or you confront someone on their Facebook page, I want you to confront yourself. So I want you to do just one thing and just pick one belief that you have about a black person or somebody who doesn't look like you. Put that belief down and confront yourself and say, why do I believe this? Who taught me this? And what was that person who taught me this benefiting? How is that benefiting them for me to believe this? Because when you start to confront yourself, then you'll start to see the bigger picture and confront the system that we're all living in. And that system was designed to keep us afraid of each other. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? Why is it that we're living in a system that made up of institutions that keep us wanting to be afraid of each other? Keep black boys and girls walking down the street realizing that they have to make themselves smaller so that that white lady doesn't feel scared of them, right?
Or teaching them at such a young age that, hey, you're different.
Yeah.
You know, I shouldn't have had to have the conversation with my 10-year-old and an 8-year-old about the N-bomb.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have to be talking to camp counselors to make sure, to see if they have protocol because my son doesn't want to go to camp anymore because he's getting the N-bomb thrown at him. Like, I don't want to have those conversations about race with my babies, but I have to.
Yeah.
I've been put into a situation where they have to learn very young that how they play on the playground, how they act at the grocery store, all of these things are connected to their race, and how they're going to be treated are connected to their race as well. I love that you said that. Merlin, I want to get you in here as well, because I like the fact that you are being really good about trying to push this conversation, because people of color get tired of trying to advocate for their race, and that's why sometimes we're really quiet in the workplace when things are being said, because it's a heavy burden to carry to be the only advocate for your race. What can we do to get people from outside of the black community to talk more about this issue? What do we need to do? How do you help educate people?
Well, I do some work with White Nonsense Roundup, which is it's a social media based thing, and we started as a response to black people and other people of color saying, "Oh, I'm so tired. Like, I'm so tired. I've had this conversation so many times, and I just don't want to. And every time I do it, it hurts me. Who can help?" And we said, well, we can help, and not all of us knew what to do. We didn't know the exact right words to say, but we were like, I can take that burden off of you, I can go in and I can educate my people, right? Because that's my job. You didn't create the racist system that we're living in. Frankly, I didn't create the racist system we're living in, but I still live in it, right? And it's still my responsibility. And I still, by just being a white person in the world, it's still something that I uphold.
Yeah, on the issue of responsibility, when I think this can, to the average person watching this, and even to us, it can seem so overwhelming to the point of inaction, because you're like, what can I do? And I didn't. This is not my fault. I didn't do this.
Right.
And when I think about this, I think about when I talked about the systems and made up of institutions.
Yeah.
But if you think about the three most influential institutions in our system, they are government, education, and media.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we as individuals need to push for change in those three areas, because of course, perception is reality.
Right.
And the way that we think about each other is all through perception. And we get those perceptions through education, what we learn coming up in elementary and high school on the playground.
Right.
We get those perceptions from the media we consume, and we get those perceptions from the laws passed by our government.
Yes.
So if our government is passing laws that wants to keep people out instead of allow them in, it makes us think, oh, well, those people must be bad.
Right.
So, I have a negative perception of those people. If the images we consume in the media are constantly negative images of certain people, we are going to carry that as much as we try to resist it. Same for education.
Yep.
And so I call on the people in positions of power in those three particular institutions. And when I say positions of power, I don't just mean the prime minister or whoever. I mean, you're working in media, the producer, the writer, the host, your education, the teacher, the assistant, the principal. Because when you come to work that day, you decide, what kind of story am I going to tell today?
That's right.
When you come to work as a teacher, you're going to decide, am I going to make this lesson inclusive? What am I going to do for Black History Month? What am I going to do outside of Black History Month, right? So anyone who works in any of those types of positions, it is your responsibility every day that you wake up to influence the perceptions that people have of each other.
Absolutely. What I do want to say, Jill, and to everyone, is that this is just the beginning. I want to throw some resources on our website, CityLine TV, that I would like to get from the three three of you and anyone else that wants to chime in, so that people can continue to figure out ways to keep all of us accountable. So it's not just an issue in our community. All of us have to be accountable so that we can all be a little bit better about dealing with the situation. Thank you so much for speaking so candidly. Thank you. And so in terms of giving you resources, I want to tell you about a feature-length doc that I've been a part of called Cool Black North. If we're talking about Black History Month, let's learn a little bit more about our history by looking at some of the people that are being celebrated. Personal and professional success stories. There's 15 people in this documentary. I'm one of them. I'm honored to be a part of it. But it basically just looks at arts, entertainment, law, business, science, social activism, and gives a little tidbit of our stories. It's going to air this Friday, February 22nd on City TV, and it's going to be available this Saturday across all demand services and streaming on citytv.com. Haven't seen it yet. Hope I am okay in it. Like, what did I say? I'm thinking back to the day I was interviewed. I'm like, I don't know. How many of you saw The Hate You Give or read it?
I read it.
I read it. I saw it. Very, very well done. So it's based on the critically acclaimed New York Times bestseller. It tells the powerful story of Star, who witnesses the fatal shooting of her childhood best friend at the hands of a police officer. She learns to find her voice and stand up for what's right. It's now available for digital download and DVD.